Welcome back to Fashion Voices, the show that brings together the hearts and minds of the industry's greats for an unfiltered discussion on a new topic each week. I'm Susie Lau, and I'm a fashion writer and blogger based in London. And this week, we'll be talking about how clothes affect the way we feel. Joining us from New York, we have Liana Satenstein, a fashion writer and host of Never Worns, a web series helping shopaholics clear out their closets. And here in London, we have behavioural psychologist and author of The Psychology of Fashion, Dr. Carolyn Mair. Welcome to Fashion Voices. Hello, Liana. Hello, Carolyn. I'm Susie, and today we're going to be talking or grappling with a pretty big subject, I think, is how clothes affect the way we feel. How do you create a mood-boosting or holistic wardrobe?
For me, I sort of have learned over the years, I have like my uniform, I have my things that are appropriate for certain occasions that I keep, just by default. And then I just I curate things that are, a little bit out of my comfort zone and add those in just to sort of give me that extra kick if I need it.
What I love most about the clothes that I love that boost my mood is they make me feel good about myself. They make me feel that I can achieve what I want to achieve in that item.
Liana, do you have any kind of personal sort of lucky items?
It's like an old blue marine top with like these blue pom-poms on it. And when I first saw it on Instagram, it's so outrageous. I feel like I'm like Carmela Soprano, like going out for a day in Moscow or something, like completely out of control. But I feel great in it.
Do you feel like the pandemic has affected the way we look at our clothes, psychologically speaking?
Yeah, I think very much the pandemic affected how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our relationships, and how we feel about the world. People are becoming much more conscious around their relationship with their clothing, thinking much more carefully, not only about environmental sustainability, but also the social sustainability that's involved in the production. Yes, so it made a massive change.
Right, that's so interesting that you say that you've highlighted the kind of conscious aspect, because I just remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a few people that highlighted to me on social media about like the kind of frivolity of fashion. But then there's this also kind of flip side where, we talk about dopamine dressing, dressing to lift our mood as a way of like kind of combating the effects of lockdown. Liana, I wondered what your thoughts were about this.
Like, for example, pre-pandemic, I would have never worn something like this to the office because, I had been going in this basically like an all black uniform. And all of a sudden I had all this time to myself to reevaluate what's in my wardrobe, what makes me feel good. And then I kind of realized that dressing like that for that long didn't really make me feel so great. So then I sort of started experimenting. Hence this. So
I totally relate with that kind of. I mean, for me though, I think it was like holding on to those like things that I love about my wardrobe was like a way of almost like keeping my sanity almost. Like if everything outside my house and my wardrobe was literally like changing so fundamentally, then the one thing that I could control is like what I put on my body.
I empathise with both of your actions through the pandemic, both wanting to dress differently, also coming out of black, which I do tend to wear a lot, but also loving some things in my wardrobe that I fall back on that make me feel good. So what we've seen as a result of the pandemic, I would say, certainly exacerbated by the pandemic, is a huge increase in mental health issues, where people have lost the opportunity to engage with others. And therefore, now we're seeing people dressing quite extravagantly, this feeling that I want to be seen. So what is dopamine dressing for one person is a different dopamine dressing for another.
I wondered though, like, can like our wardrobes be like a form of like therapy or almost like self-help?
I did this story with a color therapist who advised me on what colors to wear throughout the week. And so I dressed up in basically every single color of the wardrobe. And then I went to work like that. And I'd actually just started working at the magazine, and I was very, very quiet. I like didn't speak to anyone. I was sort of like this mouse. And then all of a sudden, when I was put in this position to wear these clothes that were so out of my comfort zone, I immediately broke out of this, silent little girl mode and was a butterfly, if you will.
The mood boosting power of colour is because of the socio-cultural associations we have with those colours. And this isn't universal. So, for example, we might find that yellow boosts our mood simply because we're constantly told over time that yellow is associated with happiness. So, the reason Liana found this butterfly effect, this new, more outgoing personality, when you were wearing different colours, was because you were looking for that engagement with other people, I would suggest. And what happened from wearing black every day, probably other people in the office were wearing black as well. You stood out because you were wearing these bright colours and people interacted with you in a different way.
Liana, you obviously like host a web series Never Worn, and I love your Instagram handle where it shmatter shrink.
Yeah.
For those who are uninitiated, what's shmatter?
So basically, shmata shrink, it's, shrinking, and then also it pertains to the slang version of, psychologist. So shmata shrink, shrinking the shmatas. Basically, this is where I go into people's closets and I talk with them what to part with and what to keep. And it's interesting because it's just sort of a conversation, and the person already probably has an inkling of what they want to keep or what they want to get rid of or what they're having a hard time parting with, but they just need to talk it through. So I'm sort of that person where they talk it through, and yeah, and then hopefully we part with things. Or what I found, which is like this is the best feeling ever, is when someone rediscovers something that they haven't worn in a long time and then they start wearing it again. Like those are two great options that come out of it.
Carolyn, like I just wondered about this idea of like nostalgia, like kind of tethering us to like our clothes. Like, is that like actually like a good thing, or I mean?
Nostalgia is obviously a bittersweet memory. That's what nostalgia is. So it can be both. But when we're asked to think of something nostalgic, we typically remember something positive. So if we have something in our wardrobe that was given to us by somebody or belonged to somebody else that we loved or cared for very much, then, I think that's quite a shame to give it away or to discard it.
This idea of if we're going to like get to like a more conscious approach towards consumption, how do we like form more of those like emotional bonds, I guess, with clothes in our wardrobe, so that we have that attachment, so that we're not going to be like just buying things frivolously or throwing things out like needlessly.
So I think what we've seen through the pandemic is people's priorities have changed. And with this are their values. And so when our values are aligned with the values of a brand, for example, we feel that emotional bond with them. And brands want their customers to have emotional bonds with the brand because that means they love the brand.
And I guess it's not just even like the values of a brand. It could be like the act of like, proactively buying secondhand or vintage. And that in itself like communicates and has that bonus of like that kind of combination of feel good, do good.
Even swapping. All those different ways of getting clothes.
So I think that's a great place to end our discussion. I want to thank our panelists, Liana and Carolyn, for joining us. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Like what you see? Subscribe to the FARFETCH YouTube channel now.